Welcome back to Trailmakers with Fenrir. Today we're having my 300 subscriber special, so we're going to be taking a look at my best and favorite creations that I still currently use. So let's get into it. So first up we have the Kitten Jet Mark 13 M6, which is probably my most used fighter jet. And as you can see, it's got some interesting things going on for it. Here in build mode, you can see it has a significant piston glitch, where we have an entire second set of fuselage and wings, as well as our weapons bay up here. And that all sinks neatly in, overlapping as the piston glitch does. We got some interesting shapes here with some overlapping wedges. We've got our weapons jutting out of the wedges up front, looking real nice. And of course we've got all that extra lift and thrust that is crammed in there. And speaking of thrust, this plane has full thrust vectoring, like pretty much every plane I'll be showing you today. And this one does it on my classic double tail, where we have pitch and roll on separate but matching servos, both on the tail instead of having roll on the wings like a lot of planes do. And then the yaw thrust vectoring is taken care of by these hinges here that are directly connected to the servos, which the style changes a little bit on my later planes, but not too much. Another thing that adds a fair amount of maneuverability to it is the fact that it has articulated canards with these simple tail fins on the servos here. So that also contributes to our pitch controls, and as you can see they're opposite of the ones in the back, if you don't know how that works. And yeah, let's get flying it. So as you can see, once we're up to speed, we're extremely steady. We hold our angle of attack really nicely. And it's not the most aggressively maneuverable thing that I have. I'm certainly going to be showing you some far more maneuverable planes, but this one's extremely stable, so I don't just use it for dogfighting, I also use it for formation flying a lot. Because that way I don't have to worry about wibbling and wobbling myself, I just have to worry about the wibbles and wobbles of my team to follow. But now that we're in the air, I can show off some of the other things. We've got some little bells and whistles. We've got flares and chaff. We have smoke. And my meow sound effect, which I also often use as an alarm. And we also have an air brake feature, where if we yaw in both directions at once, it spreads out our vertical stabilizers, but turns off the yaw thrust vectoring, so that we don't accidentally give ourselves more forward speed. And it just helps to slow the plane down and steady it out even more if it does catch a wobble. But I said it's not very maneuverable, but it is quite nimble and graceful. It handles very well, and it's probably the easiest plane that I have to fly. There's only been one person out of everyone I've ever given it to who's had a problem flying it, and I think he just didn't know how to fly planes in video games very well because he was pitching down to try to lift off. So there's that. But I also suppose the thrust vectoring plane isn't necessarily for beginners. But like I said, this is my most used aircraft, so I wanted to start off with it. So let's move on. Next up we have my Bombay Artillery Mark 18, which, as you might expect, uses Bombays as artillery. It has a massive piston accelerator here, and we also have metal crate dispensers because it fires what I call a box cannon. And the box cannon is just instantly shot accelerated metal crates, which have been nerfed over the years. Well, not over the years, just over the last few updates, I suppose. But they no longer destroy everything in their path, but they're still a very high knockback attack. which is a good start to then be followed up by the spray of death that is the bomb bay artillery itself. And as for the gunship, it's fully stabilized, so as you might have noticed, we perfectly maintain our altitude, but also when we let off the controls for strafing or forwards or backwards, it'll automatically come to a stop and hold position again. And we've got the meow sound effect, of course, because I put that in almost all of my builds nowadays. But yeah, this is just a very effective combat build, although it is kind of sturdy. It's a sitting duck, so it takes a lot of shots and gets shot out of the sky pretty easily, and it doesn't deal well with agile targets, but it's artillery. It's meant to bombard ground stuff, and from a great distance too. So like, the boxes can reach all the way over that pillar without too much problem, and the bombs definitely do, because they fire at 2 different ranges. You can see some hit the pillar and some hit the sand down below, and that was a happy accident. I didn't intentionally engineer that in, but as soon as it happened, I made sure that the rest of my bomb bays that I built from then on would do something similar. Spread the bombs out. But the majority of the bombs go the full distance. Anyways, we should probably move on, because there's quite a few other builds I want to get to. Next we have the Floating Cat Head Mark II, which as you can see is definitely piston glitched together in what I call the clamshell method, and it's packed with logic because it's fully stabilized. It's an omnidirectional flyer, so it can point in any direction and maintain its stabilization, and it can also travel in any direction, albeit rather slowly. And obviously it meows, but we also have the Frogget boombox, and a fireworks burst, as well as a self-destruct. And if you're wondering how I fit all those different controls in while still having all the omnidirectional movement, it's because there's just a little bit of logic in here. So the music you turn on by pressing L2 and R2 at the same time, and the fireworks burst you do with L1 and R1 at the same time, and self-destruct is all 4 triggers at the same time. So just a mild bit of logic, but the rest of the logic is in the actual hover system, and I do have a tutorial on this, so if you're interested in building your own, I'll try to remember to link that in the description. Also, I've often been told that this little cat face is kind of scary, horrifying, or a threat to humanity even, but I think it's adorable. Look at those eyes. There's not a thought between that head. Well, I suppose there is. There's logic. Anyways, let's move on. Next up we have the Kitten Jet Mark 14I, which is a VTOL. If I crack it open a little bit here, you'll see that we have all of our thrusters articulated on hinges, so that they can point straight downwards and toggle on and off. And we have a set of those in the tail as well. And we have the same maneuvering thrusters almost as we had on the Mark 13 M6, the very first plane that I showed you. But it's just a slightly different arrangement with the thrust vectoring hinges. But anyways, let's get to flying it, because that's where it really shines. It's almost perfectly balanced end to end, so it's really easy to fly, and like all of my planes, there's no gyros in it. It's just the thrust vectoring for controls, and it's pretty easy to maneuver. Very controllable, very smooth. And as far as forward flight goes, it's also pretty decent. It performs just slightly worse than 13 M6, because it doesn't have nearly as much forward thrust. It's a little slower to accelerate and a lower top speed, but it has about the same agility. I think the plane is slightly longer than the other one, so it has a little bit more, or a little bit less pitch control, I mean. But other than that, it should be about the same because it's the same amount of thrust vectoring on a very similarly sized plane. Let's come in for a nice little landing here, so that we can move on. Next up we had the Kitten Jet Mark 12Y9, which as you can see it has some of the zero drag glitching going on, but it's only partially zero dragged, and that's not because I wanted it to be a slightly slower speed, it's because it hit max complexity. Well, almost max complexity. It's 790 or 697 out of 700. But fun fact, this plane all the way up till its like 5th iteration would have a 50-50% chance of tearing itself apart when you spawned it in because the piston glitch had a chance of failing. Now eventually when the 6x2 blocks came in, I was able to rearrange the structure, fix the weld groups, and make it so that it had no chance of exploding. And it also has a little hinge glitch up here, which probably didn't really add to the stability whatsoever. But you might have noticed we've got those little pods on our wingtips, and those are extra yaw thrusters, in the style of some of my older planes, before I articulated the yaw. So we've got a lot of yaw thrust vectoring. We can spin right in place as if we had gyros. And you might have also noticed that the maneuvering thrusters are doubled up. On each of the servos there's 2 space thrusters instead of 1, so even though this is still about the same size as the other 2 planes that I've shown so far, it's a fair bit more maneuverable. Not just because of the extra yaw. But it's about more of the same. All the guns on these planes have been the same set. They're 6 smart cannons and 2 rockets. I call it my standard kit, because that's what I normally put on planes of this size. But we still have the meow sound effect, smoke, flares, and chaff. Well, fireworks, but I call the black and gray fireworks chaff because that's what they're supposed to be mirroring, or mimicking. But yeah, just another very successful fighter jet that I wanted to show off. It's not quite as stable and steady as the Mark 13M, so I don't use it for formation flying so much. It's more of a hunter-killer, because our max speed is over 600 miles an hour. We can chase down most anyone who's not fully zero dragged, or just barely subsonic. But anyways, we should probably move on before I babble too much about this plane, because I've honestly gone over all of the details that aren't covered by other planes. So we'll just come in for another nice landing here. Now I've been showing off a bunch of aerial builds, but I've got some ground and sea builds to show off too. This here is the Heavy Cat Tank Mark 8B, which as you can see has quite a few things going on for it. We've got a bunch of piston glitching, of course, where we sink the wheels into each other for the tracks, and we also sink the fenders down on top of the wheels, which draws the turret into the body as well to protect the servo. And we've got a piston glitch on the barrel here too, to fit in extra weaponry. So you can watch it all squish together. And, well, of course I get out on the wrong side, but yeah, it all squishes down together. And to run all these weapons, we have some logic. I have a tutorial on the weapon selection logic, but we have a main cannon, a flak cannon, which is focusing on a little bit of debris over there. We've got coaxial machine guns, flamethrower, short-range Bombay artillery, and a landmine pooper. And the 7th setting there is just a meow. But anyways, yeah, it's just kind of a tank. And it handles decently if we head over to somewhere with some terrain, I suppose. The only thing it doesn't really do is turn on grass well, but that's just kind of a normal issue with tank steering in this game. But it could be worse. Maybe once we get the new tank track blocks, I'll upgrade this and it'll have better traction, but we'll see how those work. Anyways, let's move on. Next up, we have my multi-part destroyer, which I wanted to start off in separate pieces so that I could show you the connection points, which I don't think I've done in previous videos. We've got wedges that'll stabilize us up and down, and side to side, the blue and green ones respectively. Then we've got, on pistons, we've got the anchor pins that'll come out and attach to the hull section over there. And we also have these little shield pieces on pistons that'll be pushing in and out with our controls, so that the different pieces can communicate with each other to the distance sensors over here. So let's get to plugging them together, and I may or may not fast forward through it, so I'm probably just going to be quiet. Okay, and then just resynchronize the weapon controls. And we don't have the best connection. We are clattering a little bit, but we can deal with that for right now. So as far as weapons go, we've got several different selections. We've got our main cannons, which are double firing. They got a second set of cannons piston glitched in with a slightly offset timing. So you can fire them directly one after another, or you can fire just one, then fire another one slightly later. We've got the Bombay artilleries on the front, which are smaller and shorter range than the one on the back, and a little bit more scattered. They, I was running out of complexity, so they're kind of janky. Then we have the torpedo launchers on the front, which can be fired individually in case you have allies or land next to you. Then our next setting is all the bells and whistles. We've got flares, the meow, a bell, the horn, and frogget music. And then the next setting is the main cannon on the back, which is double firing just like the front. Then we have the torpedoes on the back, which are a set of 5 instead of 3. And this setting also has the depth charges, which fire off in a nice little spread. And finally, we've got the Bombay launcher on the back, which has twice as many bombs as the ones in the front, and is a little bit longer range and more accurate. And the entire ship is controlled and driven from that one seat. The other two pieces don't have any seat in them whatsoever, so the ship can't be stolen with or tampered with while you're out on it. Well, I suppose it can be tampered with in the normal Trailmakers ways of like shooting it or grabbing it with magnets and stuff, but I mean, because I haven't uploaded this to the gallery or spread it to anyone, no one can take this ship from me, because as long as I spawn in the last piece first, or the last piece last, then I don't have to worry about it. but I do eventually share all my builds, just I don't really share the multi-part ones. I put a lot of work into these, and I want to keep it to myself. I just want to share the idea. I do have a tutorial on how to build these multi-part ships, though, as well as I mentioned a tutorial on the weapon selection logic. I've got a whole bunch of tutorials, so if you want a ship like this, I can definitely teach you how to build them. I'm just not going to give you this particular ship. I'll give you all the planes, though. Most of them are already uploaded. Anyways, let's get to showing off more builds instead of just babbling about them. Next up we have another plane, and this is the Squishy Mark 1F. And I call it the Squishy for two reasons. One, because of all the piston and hinge glitching and things going on. We got a lot of parts being squished into other parts. But it's also squishy because it's really easy to shoot down because of all these points of failure where you can just blow off an entire wing by blowing off one piece. And it's got a little bit of zero drag just to take care of the really bad aerodynamics around it, or at least most of the really bad aerodynamics. And even though it's a propeller plane, it has full thrust vectoring. And it takes off like a dream. You don't actually have to touch the controls at all when you're taking off. It'll just take off a flat ground on its own. And it will maintain a pretty even trajectory. It doesn't really like to pitch up or down very much, but it does like to lean to one side or the other a little bit, so it just tends to have a natural roll and turn to it. But it's pretty easy to maintain the adjustments for that. Just a little twitch on the controls here and there. Yeah, we've got the nicer weapon skins on the guns for the cool sound effect. And we've got 3 bomb bays on a tight spread, as well as the meow and smoke. And we also, unlike a lot of the other planes, this still has my old cruise control, where pressing up and down on the D-pad will increase or decrease the amount of thrust you have locked in, so you can take your fingers entirely off the controls. Like right now I've got the controller set down on my lap, and it'll just maintain speed and position and everything and just fly itself more or less for long enough to pet my cat or take a drink of water or even have a small snack if I want to, as long as I don't let it run into anything, I suppose. But I don't really put the cruise control in my planes too often anymore because I didn't really use it too often. But anyways, let's move on. Next we have the Kittenov Mark 1G, which is one of the current variations of my favorite bomber plane. And some noteworthy features are the fact that it has yaw air braking with those flaps on the sides. It has full thrust vectoring, which is a fairly new addition to the Kittenov. I think it was only added in this version. And we've got miniguns fanned out on the back that are fixed in place, and 2 on the front that are on aiming servos, so that we can have full firepower at the front, or get some firepower way off to the side as well. And as for the bombs, we have 4 bomb bays on a decent spread, and we can also toggle it over to fire 4 torpedoes. And we've got the meow sound effect, of course, because it's the Kittenov. And speaking of kittens, you might be able to hear my cat's bell over there. Hopefully that's not too annoying in the video. But anyways, yeah, it's just a very nice bomber. Well, maybe not very nice, but it's my favorite. So I've rebuilt it and rearranged its guts quite a few times, and generally made it better over the years. Because this one is at least a year old, probably more. Well, the original fuselage and wings. Like I said, the guts have all been changed out. But let's move on, shall we? Now for another bomber, but quite a different style, we have the Kitten Jet Mark 14 M2, the Wishbone. Now it's pretty obvious why it's called the Wishbone by its shape. It's got that big open concept bomb bay. But what's not obvious is that it's a VTOL. It uses the same style of articulated thrusters as the earlier VTOL, but it has these nice two cat bombs on them. And the cat bombs have two different fuses. We have an altitude fuse, so if we let one go over the water, we'll see that it explodes on contact with the surface. And the other fuse is a speed-related fuse, an inertia fuse, I like to call it. So you'll see that it slides around the ground until it comes to a halt, and then it explodes. Which is so that if it hits a surface too lightly to detonate the dynamite just through impact, as soon as the cat stops moving or starts spinning and not moving forwards, it'll explode. And yeah, it's cat bombs. There's not much more to say about them other than the fact that they've got the interesting fuses and they meow as they go down. Oh, and there is a 2-second safety fuse from when you drop them, so none of the sensors are active on the bombs until after you drop them, even the inertia fuse. But let's move on. Next is my up-and-coming all-star here. This is the Mark 14-0 Pixie Blade. And it's very compact, which makes its survivability extremely low, but it makes up for it with high speed and high agility. And it actually has slightly lower weapons kit than my normal setup. It's just got 4 smart cannons instead of 6. And it doesn't have as many of the bells and whistles, though it still has some. It doesn't even have landing gear. But as you can see, we're going quite a bit faster than the earlier Kitten Jets tended to. The only one that's faster was the one that's zero-dragged, and I think I will show you the zero-dragged version of this one because there's some extra logic in it. But it handles pretty well. It's a little floppy and sloppy, a little, maybe not floppy and sloppy, it's twitchy, I would say. It's really easy, especially for the roll, to overcompensate. But it does just have a little bit of floatiness to the controls. So it's not sure whether it wants to pitch up or down. If you leave it trending up, it'll trend up, and if you leave it trending down, it tends to trend down. It doesn't want to just hold trajectory, but it's not so much about being a formation flyer with this plane. This is all about the attack. But anyways, let me grab the zero-drag version to show that off. And here's the Pixie Blade with its zero-drag on, which unlike the Mark 12Y9 earlier, the red one, this is a complete zero-drag. And it's so compact that even with the complete zero-drag, we're not at half complexity yet. But the full zero-drag just means that every single piece is zero-dragged, giving it theoretically infinite speed. And in order to help support controlling it at those high speeds, there's a little bit of extra logic in it that stiffens up the control surfaces once we reach above 500 miles an hour, I think it is. But yeah, it'll just keep speeding up and speeding up and speeding up until we either hit something or turn around. And even when we turn, we can still maintain a fair amount of speed because we've got those stiffened up controls. We don't overcompensate at all. Okay, here we are, we're just cruising over 2,000 miles an hour and we hit the barrier. And I love it. We were going so fast that we spawned in still sliding a little bit. That's always funny. But yeah, that's the Mark 14-0 Pixie Blade in both of its forms. And it's It hasn't fought any really stiff competition yet, but as long as they don't get a lucky hit in, especially with a rocket, it tends to do really, really well. It just outmaneuvers people and stays behind them so they don't even get the chance to shoot it. So it's absolutely flimsy nature. It doesn't come into play as much as you might think. But its nature is very flimsy. I mean, there's two different 3x1 wedges that you can destroy in order to knock off the only vertical stabilizer and send it completely to its doom. So, it's a very easy plane to shoot down in theory, but in practice it's been holding its own really well. I've got at least one video released and another in the making of it in combat, so you should see this in action once in a while. But anyways, let's move on. I'll just quickly show the arrowhead here, which is just a 2-wide version of the Pixie Blade. But unlike the Pixie Blade, it's got a little bit more armor on its vertical stabilizer, a little bit more redundancy because it's multiple pieces, and it has the air brake feature because it's got the two halves that can spread open. But other than that, it's about the same as the Pixie Blade in performance. We've got the Mark 13 M8, which I don't think I mentioned earlier, is named the Midnight, but it's kind of obvious by the midnight blue. But this one, if we take a look at the tail, it has, what do we call it, fuel and ammo systems. And it's got 250 seconds worth of fuel, which is represented by the 100% there. It has 50 seconds worth of machine gun ammo, and 12 pairs of rockets. And while we're on the ground, it won't decrease, because when you're on the ground is when it refuels. It's got a distance sensor on the belly. And yeah, if we take a look at the front here, once the icons go away, you can see our fuel's draining there. When it gets down to 10% on any of these systems, it'll start beeping, giving you a warning that you're almost out. And if I spam the rocket button, the rocket buttons are really slow, drawn-out beep, but they each have their own speed of beeping. And yeah, you can see as soon as we touch on the ground there, we recharged, stopped beeping. But other than that, it's almost exactly identical to the Mark 13 M6, the very first one I showed you. Because it's that plane with the fuel and ammo systems integrated into it. There's very little structural changes because the logic is just swapped into place of a bunch of pieces in the middle. And I will also show the Mark 13 M9, which is an amphibious version of the same plane. They've got a variety of underwater and outboard motors on us, and it gives us full thrust vectoring underwater as well, which, while we're much slower underwater, we're still fully maneuverable, of course. And we've swapped out the guns with lasers so that they work underwater, and the rockets with torpedoes, which obviously cuts down the above water firepower a little bit, but it's an amphibious plane, so I'd most likely be using the sky version if I'm fighting just sky opponents, so the underwater armament made more sense. But speaking of torpedoes, one of the last things I want to show off before my recording timer runs up on me is my hybrid torpedo gun. Now, everyone's probably seen Scrapman's video at this point, at least if you're watching my Trailmakers channel, but we know that the pulse miner can throw these torpedoes at a pretty good distance, and you're probably also aware, at least you might be aware, that pistons can also throw the torpedoes at considerable distance. Now, did you also know that the pistons can send the pulse miner pulse much farther and faster? What this does is first it shoots the torpedoes with the pistons, then directly afterwards it shoots the pulse with the pistons, which catches up to the torpedoes and launches them even further. So they just go really, really far, really, really fast. Like, unnecessarily far. Even, here, I'll repair so it's pointing perfectly forward again. And I'll point over at something that we can see the explosions on if they blow up. Yeah. You can see they get the... oh, that time they passed right through the rock. But if they blow up on there again, you can see we've barely got any drop to them because they get over there so fast. And they're mounted on the Tadpole gunship again, because it's just a very good weapons platform. And yeah, I couldn't help but show this off as one of the last things, because it's one of the unnecessary powerful weapons that I've mounted onto this thing, and I like that. And we've come to Test Zone for the very last build because it needs flat ground, and a lot of it. This here is my Bionic Race Car Mark 45, and it's currently holding first place in the Grand Prix and Bionic League, and has been for at least a month now, I think. There's not any sign of anyone beating it quite yet, let's put it that way. But as you can see in build mode, it's not zero-dragged whatsoever. I don't zero-drag any of my race vehicles, yet it can go well over 500 miles an hour, and is pretty darn agile too. Which it needs to be for the Grand Prix because there's some pretty tight turns and hairpin turns. But it does have some issues. What you saw there was just a tick of bionic engine damage, which happens from instability and shaking in the engine, from what I can tell anyways, where just the slight amount of play and wiggle in these servos allows damage to occur out here on our fins. But it normally survives the full race because it can do the race in only 40 seconds. Well, my record is slightly under 40 seconds now, but yeah, it runs the race in approximately 40 seconds. And I figured this would be a good one to end on because I had to switch maps for it, of course, but also because it's holding a record right now. I don't know what the time for the Grand Prix Bionic League is on PC or Xbox, but I hope I'm beating them too. That'd be pretty cool if I had the record. But at the very least, it's the fastest one on PlayStation that can run the Grand Prix. So yeah, I think that about does it. If you have any questions, leave them in the comments section. And if you want to make me happy, or help the channel out, please leave a like and subscribe. Goodbye now.
PlayStation